the world didn't end with a bang like everyone thought it would. It ended with a gurgle, a moan, and the shuffling of a million dead feet dragging across broken asphalt. Jake Morrison had been a regular guy before all this went down, working construction in downtown Detroit, grabbing beers with his buddies on Friday nights, and complaining about traffic like it was the worst thing that could happen to a person. Man, he'd give anything to be stuck in rush hour right about now. Instead, he was crouched behind an overturned delivery truck, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might burst right out of his chest, while 3 of those things shuffled past, their feet scraping against the concrete in that nightmare rhythm he'd never get used to. The dead ones weren't supposed to move. That was the rule, right? You die, you stay down, end of story. But 3 weeks ago, something broke that rule into a million pieces and scattered them across the entire country. Jake had watched it happen from his apartment window, seen his neighbor Mrs. Patterson from 4B stumble out into the hallway with her throat torn open, still walking, still hungry. He'd grabbed his tool belt, his dad's old hunting rifle, and whatever food he could stuff into a backpack, and he'd run. That was 3 weeks ago, and he was still running, still trying to figure out how the hell the world had gone straight to pieces so fast. The truck he was hiding behind smelled like rotten fruit and something else, something worse that he didn't want to think about too hard. His breathing was coming too fast, too loud, and he forced himself to slow it down, count to 4 on the inhale, hold it, count to 4 on the exhale. His older brother Tommy had taught him that trick during a panic attack at their dad's funeral. Tommy. Jake's jaw clenched. Tommy had been in Chicago when everything went sideways, and the last text Jake got from him was just 2 words, stay alive. He was trying, man. He was really trying. The shuffling sounds faded, and Jake risked a peek around the edge of the truck. The street was clear, at least for the moment, just abandoned cars and broken windows and papers blowing around like urban tumbleweeds. He needed to get to the community center on Marshall Street. He'd heard on a working radio 2 days ago that there were survivors gathering there, real live people organizing some kind of resistance. The broadcast had been quick, almost desperate. Marshall Community Center. We're fighting back. Bring supplies. Bring skills. Bring hope. It was the first message in weeks that wasn't just screaming or crying or dead air. Jake checked his rifle, even though he'd checked it like 5 minutes ago. 6 rounds left. He had to make each one count because ammunition wasn't exactly growing on trees these days. He'd gotten pretty decent at avoiding the dead ones instead of fighting them. They weren't smart, not really. They responded to noise and movement, sure, but if you stayed quiet and didn't do anything stupid, you could usually slip right past them. Usually. The problem was that usually wasn't exactly a guarantee you could bet your life on, and lately, that's exactly what every single decision came down to. He made his move, keeping low, staying close to the buildings where the shadows were thickest. The late afternoon sun was starting to slant through the empty streets, painting everything in orange and gold like some kind of sick joke. Beautiful sunset, end of the world. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. He made it 2 blocks before he heard it, voices. Living, human voices, and not the moaning kind. Jake's heart jumped. He followed the sound to a busted-out storefront that used to be a pharmacy, and through the shattered window, he could see 3 people inside, all of them looking scared and desperate. There was a woman, maybe in her 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and blood on her jacket. Next to her was a teenage kid, couldn't be more than 16, with thick glasses held together with duct tape and a baseball bat that looked too heavy for his skinny arms. The third was an older dude, probably 60-something, with a gray beard and a tire iron clutched in his weathered hands. They were arguing in harsh whispers, the kind that people use when they're terrified but can't afford to yell. "We can't stay here, Marcus," the woman was saying. "There's too many of them between us and the center." The older guy, Marcus apparently, shook his head. "Rebecca, we go out there now, we're dead. We wait until dark, we got a better chance." The kid with the glasses spoke up, his voice cracking. Dark is worse. They don't need light to find us, but we needed to see them coming. Basic survival logic. Nobody asked you, Trevor, Rebecca snapped, but there wasn't any real heat in it. She just sounded tired, scared, running on fumes. Jake made a decision that was probably stupid but felt right anyway. He tapped on the door frame lightly, not loud enough to attract the dead but enough to get their attention. All three of them spun toward him, weapons raised, eyes wide with fear and adrenaline. Jake raised his hands slowly, rifle pointed at the ceiling. Easy, easy, he said quietly. I'm breathing, I'm thinking, and I'm not trying to eat anybody. We're cool, yeah. Marcus didn't lower the tire iron. Who the hell are you? Name's Jake Morrison. I've been heading to the Marshall Center, heard the same broadcast you probably did. Figured 3 people trying to get there are better than 1, and 4's even better than that. Safety in numbers and all that. Rebecca studied him with sharp, calculating eyes. She was the kind of woman who'd probably been a teacher or a lawyer or something before, someone used to reading people, figuring out who was full of it and who was legit. After a moment that felt like an hour, she lowered her crowbar slightly. You know how to use that rifle, or is it just for show? She asked. I know which end the bullets come out of, if that's what you're asking. I'm not military or anything, but my dad took me hunting enough times. I can handle myself. Trevor pushed his glasses up his nose. Can you prove you're not infected? No bites, no scratches? It was a fair question. Jake slowly rolled up his sleeves, turned his arms over, then lifted his shirt to show his torso. Clean. You want to check my ankles too, or are we good? Marcus finally lowered his tire iron. Kid's got a point, though. We all need to be sure about each other. This world's gone crazy enough without adding infected to our group. They all checked each other, quick and clinical, nobody being weird about it because survival mattered more than modesty these days. Once they were satisfied that nobody was about to turn into a flesh-eating monster, the tension in the room dropped from critical to just regular apocalypse-level stress. So what's the plan? Jake asked. Because the kid's right about the dark. Those things might not need eyes, but we sure as hell do, and I don't know about you, but my night vision isn't exactly military grade. Rebecca moved to the window, careful to stay in the shadows, and peered out. There's a cluster of them about half a block east, maybe 15 or 20. Between us and the center. We go around, we add another mile to the trip, and it's getting late. We don't have a mile's worth of daylight left. We fight through? Trevor asked, trying to sound brave but not quite making it. The bat trembled slightly in his hands. Last resort, Marcus said firmly. You start a fight with even one of them, and the noise brings more. Brings all of them within earshot. Then you're not fighting 15, you're fighting 50, 100. No way we win that. Jake thought hard, his construction worker brain kicking into gear. He'd spent years solving problems, figuring out how to get heavy things from point A to point B, how to work around obstacles, how to make structures sound when they wanted to fall apart. This wasn't that different, not really. Just different stakes. Distraction, he said suddenly. We need to draw them off, give us a clear path. With what? Rebecca asked. We don't exactly have fireworks or car alarms. Jake grinned despite everything. No, but I bet we've got something better. This is a pharmacy, right? What's still on the shelves? They spent the next 10 minutes scrounging, and Jake found what he needed, rubbing alcohol, some old magazines, and what looked like the remains of someone's birthday card display. Trevor found a couple of those cheap plastic lighters near what used to be the checkout counter. It wasn't much, but it would work. We make a fire starter, toss it in the opposite direction, far as we can throw it, Jake explained. The smoke, the light, maybe even the smell if we're lucky, it'll draw them that way. We move fast while they're distracted, stay quiet, and we're at the center before they even know we were here. That's actually not terrible, Rebecca admitted. Quick, simple, uses what we have. I like it. Marcus nodded slowly. In my day, we'd call that using your head. Let's do it before I think too hard about all the ways it could go wrong. They built 2 of them, just to be safe, wrapping the alcohol-soaked magazines tight with strips of cloth they tore from an old promotional banner. Jake hefted one, testing the weight. It wasn't perfect, but it would fly far enough. Probably. Maybe. He really hoped so. Trevor took the other one. I was on the baseball team before, he said quietly. JV pitcher. I can throw pretty far. Then you're up, kid, Jake said. On 3, we light these things and throw them as far east as we can. Everyone else gets ready to move west the second these things start burning. We stay low, we stay quiet, and we don't stop until we're at those center doors. Everyone got it? They all nodded, faces set with determination and fear mixed in equal measure. This was it. This was the moment where they either made it or they didn't, where luck and planning collided with reality and someone rolled the dice. Jake's hands were steady as he flicked the lighter, touched the flame to the alcohol-soaked paper. It caught immediately, eager and hot. Trevor's caught just as fast. 1, Jake counted. 2. 3. They threw. Jake put everything he had into it, watched the burning bundle arc through the air, trailing smoke like a comet. Trevor's went even farther, the kid's arms snapping forward with surprising strength. Both devices hit the ground about 30 yards away, immediately starting to burn brighter, the magazines catching and creating dark smoke that billowed up into the evening air. The effect was immediate. The shuffling cluster of dead things turned as one, that weird hive mind thing they sometimes did, and started moving toward the flames. More came from doorways and alleys, drawn by the light and the disturbance. It was working. Holy crap, it was actually working. Move, now! Rebecca hissed, and they moved. They ran in a crouched sprint, Jake in front because he had the rifle, Marcus bringing up the rear with his tire iron. The community center was 6 blocks away, and they covered the first 3 without seeing a single corpse. The 4th block had 2 of them, but they were shambling toward the fire Jake and Trevor had set, completely ignoring the living people slipping past in the opposite direction. Block 5 was clear. Block 6, and Jake could see it, the Marshall Community Center, a 2-story brick building that had probably hosted kids' basketball games and bingo nights before the world ended. Now it had barricaded windows, reinforced doors, and what looked like people standing watch on the roof. Real, live people with weapons and purpose. They were 50 yards away when things went wrong. A corpse stumbled out of a side alley, a fresh one by the look of it, still wearing a postal worker's uniform. It saw them immediately, let out that horrible gurgling moan, and lurched forward with more speed than the rotten ones usually had. Don't shoot! Rebecca yelled at Jake. The noise! She was right. Jake slung the rifle and pulled out his hammer instead, the same framing hammer he'd used for 5 years on construction sites. The postal corpse reached for Trevor, who swung his bat in a wild panic. He connected with its shoulder, knocking it sideways but not down. Marcus was there a second later, bringing the tire iron down on its skull with a sickening crunch that Jake felt in his teeth. It dropped, finally, permanently dead this time. But the damage was done. The noise had attracted attention. Shapes were emerging from buildings, from cars, from everywhere. The fire distraction had worked, but not perfectly. There were still plenty of them around, and now they knew exactly where dinner was. Run! Jake shouted, forgetting quiet, because quiet didn't matter anymore. Just run. They ran. Full sprint, no more crouching, no more stealth. Just pure survival instinct and adrenaline. Behind them, the moaning grew louder, that awful chorus of the dead that would haunt Jake's nightmares for the rest of his life, however long that turned out to be. The center's doors were ahead. People on the roof were shouting, pointing. One of them, a woman with short blonde hair and a hunting rifle, aimed past Jake's group and fired. The shot cracked through the air, and somewhere behind them, one of the corpses went down. She fired again, and again, giving them cover. 20 yards. 10. 5. The doors burst open, and a massive guy built like a linebacker appeared, gesturing frantically. Come on, move it. They practically fell through the doors. Jake was the last one in, spinning around just in time to see a corpse reaching for him, fingers grasping at empty air. The big guy slammed the door shut, and 3 other people immediately started barricading it with furniture, metal bars, anything heavy they could move into place. Jake collapsed against a wall, gasping for air, his whole body shaking with exhaustion and fading adrenaline. Rebecca was bent over, hands on her knees, breathing hard but alive. Marcus leaned against a desk, looking like he'd just run a marathon at 60+ years old. Trevor sat on the floor, still clutching his bat, his face pale behind those taped-up glasses. Welcome to the Marshall Center, the big guy said, offering Jake a hand up. Name's Derek Washington. You folks picked one hell of a time to drop by. Jake took the hand, let himself be pulled to his feet. Jake Morrison. Thanks for the cover fire. We were about 5 seconds from being zombie chow out there. Yeah, we noticed. Derek had a deep voice, the kind that commanded attention without trying. You all get bit? Scratched? Anyone need medical? They all shook their heads. Another guy appeared, this one lean and wiry with sharp features and suspicious eyes. He had a handgun tucked into his belt and the look of someone who'd seen too much combat. We need to check them anyway, Derek. Protocol. I know the protocol, Mitchell, Derek said patiently. Let them catch their breath first, then we'll do the check. They just outran half the city's dead population. The next 20 minutes were a blur of introductions, medical checks, and explanations. The center was set up as a genuine stronghold, Jake realized. There were maybe 40 people inside, all of them with assigned roles and responsibilities. The blonde woman who'd provided cover fire was named Amanda Price, former police officer, now head of security. The suspicious guy was Kyle Mitchell, ex-military, in charge of supply runs and defense strategy. There was a doctor, an actual MD named Patricia Holmes, who checked all 4 of the newcomers for bites and infections with professional efficiency. You're all clear, she announced finally. Dehydrated, exhausted, probably malnourished, but not infected. Drink water, eat something, and try to rest. Derek led them deeper into the center, past makeshift sleeping areas and a communal kitchen where someone was cooking something that actually smelled like real food. We've been broadcasting that message for a week now, he explained. Hoping to gather survivors, build something real here. You're the 4th group to make it. A lot of others tried and didn't make it through. What's the plan? Jake asked. I mean, long-term. We can't just hide in here forever. Derek's expression turned serious. Conference room. 30 minutes. We have a community meeting every night at 8, everyone who's capable attends. We'll lay out everything we know, everything we're planning. You'll get answers, I promise. For now, just decompress. They were given water, actual clean water, and bread that was only a little stale. Jake ate slowly, letting his body remember what it felt like to have something in his stomach besides fear and adrenaline. Around him, the center buzzed with quiet activity. People were working, talking, living despite everything falling apart outside those walls. It was the first time in 3 weeks that he'd felt something like hope. The conference room was actually the center's old library, the books pushed aside to make room for a large table covered in maps, notes, and supply lists. When 8 o'clock came, nearly everyone in the center gathered around, sitting on chairs and tables in the floor. Derek stood at the head of the table, Amanda and Kyle flanking him like lieutenants. All right, people, Derek began. We've got new faces tonight, so let's start with the basics for their benefit, then we'll get into the new developments. 3 weeks ago, everything we knew about the world changed. The dead started walking, and civilization collapsed faster than anyone thought possible. We don't know why it happened, how it spread, or if there's a cure. What we do know is that we're survivors, and we're not going down without a fight. Someone in the crowd, a middle-aged man with grease-stained hands, spoke up. Tell them about the patterns, Derek. The migration. Derek nodded. Right. We've been observing the infected for 2 weeks now, tracking their movements. Amanda, you want to take this? Amanda stepped forward, pointing to a map of the city marked with colored pins. The infected aren't as random as they seem. They migrate in herds, following sound and movement, but also following each other. We've identified 3 major herds in the city, each one numbering in the hundreds. They move in patterns, almost like patrols. If we time our movements right, we can predict where they'll be and avoid them. That's how we've managed to run supply operations without losing people. Kyle picked up the explanation. We've also identified key locations that are still salvageable. Grocery stores, pharmacies, hardware stores, gun shops. Most have been picked over, but there's still useful stuff if you know where to look. We run organized supply missions every 3 days, small teams, in and out fast. Jake raised his hand, feeling like he was back in school. What about other survivors? Are there other groups like this? Derek's expression darkened slightly. Yeah, there are. Not all of them friendly. We've had contact with 2 other survivor communities. One of them, over on the east side, we trade with sometimes. Good people, mostly families. The other one, near the industrial district, they're raiders. They take what they want, don't care who they hurt. We avoid them. Rebecca leaned forward. So what's the endgame? We can't stay in this city forever. Eventually, supplies run out, the infected get too numerous, something gives. You're right, Derek admitted. That's what tonight's meeting is really about. We've been making contact with other survivor groups across the state using ham radios. There's talk of a larger community forming upstate, a place called Haven Point. It's supposedly fortified, agricultural, sustainable. A real chance at rebuilding. Sounds too good to be true, Marcus said, his voice heavy with skepticism. Maybe, Amanda agreed. But it's the best lead we have. The problem is getting there. It's 150 miles, mostly through infected territory. We'd need vehicles, fuel, weapons, supplies, and a route that doesn't get us all killed. Trevor spoke up, his voice steadier now. But you're planning it anyway. You're planning to evacuate. Derek met his eyes. We're planning to give people a choice. Stay here and try to hold out, or risk the journey for a chance at something better. No one's forced either way. But yeah, we're working on making the evacuation possible for those who want it. The meeting continued for another hour, covering everything from water purification to watch rotations to the medical supplies situation. Jake listened to it all, impressed by how organized these people were, how they'd taken the end of the world and built structure out of chaos. By the time Derek called it for the night, Jake's head was spinning with information, but he also felt something he hadn't felt in weeks: purpose. As people dispersed to their sleeping areas, Derek pulled Jake aside. You said you were construction, right? Before all this? Yeah, 5 years framing houses, working on commercial buildings. I know my way around tools and materials. Why? Derek grinned. Because we need to reinforce the north wall, and our only handyman broke his arm on the last supply run. You interested in being useful? Man, I've been useless for 3 weeks. Being useful sounds amazing right about now. Over the next few days, Jake threw himself into the work. He reinforced walls, built better barricades, created noise traps that would alert them if infected got too close. He worked alongside Marcus, who turned out to be a retired electrician and proved invaluable when they needed to set up the solar panels someone had scavenged. Rebecca organized the center's library, cataloging useful information about survival, medicine, and agriculture. Trevor, despite his age, became Amanda's assistant, helping track infected movements and learning about security. A week into their stay at the center, Kyle assembled a supply run team. "We need medical supplies," he announced at the morning briefing. "There's a hospital 3 miles from here, already been hit hard, but Patricia says there might still be useful stuff in the upper floors. I need 3 people who can move fast and handle themselves if things get hot." Jake volunteered immediately. So did a woman named Lisa Chen, who'd been a paramedic before and knew what supplies to prioritize. The third volunteer was a quiet guy named Marcus Rodriguez, no relation to the Marcus Jake had arrived with, who'd been a marathon runner and could apparently run for hours without getting winded. They left at dawn, when the infected were usually slowest. Kyle drove a reinforced van they'd been modifying, with metal grates over the windows and a ram guard on the front. The streets were desolate in the early morning light, littered with abandoned cars and debris. They saw infected, but not many, just stragglers who turned toward the sound of the engine but couldn't keep pace. The hospital loomed ahead, a 6-story monument to a world that used to care about saving lives. Now it was just another tomb. Kyle parked near a side entrance, leaving the engine running. 20 minutes, he said firmly. "In and out. If it goes bad, you bail and get back to this van. We don't risk lives for supplies we might not even find. Clear?" Everyone nodded. They'd all heard stories about supply runs that went wrong, about people who didn't come back. Jake checked his rifle, even though he'd checked it 3 times already. Lisa had a pistol and a backpack full of empty containers for medicine. Marcus Rodriguez carried a machete and a crowbar, preferring close-range weapons. The hospital's interior was dark and smelled like death and disinfectant. They used flashlights, sweeping them quickly to avoid attracting attention. The first floor was a disaster, bodies and blood everywhere, medical equipment scattered like toys. They moved to the stairs, climbing quickly but quietly. The third floor was labeled pharmacy and medical storage. Lisa's eyes lit up. "This is it. This is what we need." They found the pharmacy, its security door already broken open. Inside was a mess, but there were still bottles on the shelves, supplies in drawers. Lisa started grabbing things with practiced efficiency: antibiotics, painkillers, surgical supplies, antiseptics. Jake and Marcus kept watch, ears straining for any sound that didn't belong. That's when they heard it: footsteps. Not shuffling, not dragging. Actual footsteps, multiple people, coming from the floor above. Jake's blood ran cold. Infected didn't walk like that. People did. And people could be worse than infected. Kyle appeared at the pharmacy door, his face tense. "We've got company. Living kind. 4 or 5 of them, heading down. Could be friendly, could be raiders. We don't wait to find out. Grab what you've got and we move, now." They grabbed what they could carry and headed for the stairs, but the voices were getting closer. Jake could hear them now, harsh and aggressive. "I'm telling you, I heard something down there. Fresh meat, maybe supplies. Could be our lucky day. Or it could be infected, you idiot. Let's just get what we came for and bail." They weren't going to make it to the stairs without being seen. Kyle made a snap decision, pulling them into a patient room and closing the door silently. They crouched in the darkness, barely breathing, as the voices passed right outside. "Check the pharmacy, then we hit the surgical floor. These center people think they're so smart, hoarding supplies. We'll see how smart they are when we roll up with superior firepower." The center. These weren't just random raiders. They were specifically targeting Derek's community. Jake's jaw clenched. They had to get back, had to warn everyone. The raiders moved past, heading deeper into the floor. Kyle gestured sharply, and they moved out, quick and silent, making for the stairs. They'd almost made it when someone shouted behind them. "Hey! Hey, stop! Run!" Kyle barked, and they ran. The raiders gave chase, footsteps pounding behind them. Jake didn't look back, just focused on the stairs, on getting down and out. They burst out of the hospital into daylight, sprinting for the van. Gunshots cracked behind them, bullets sparking off concrete. Kyle got the van moving before everyone was even fully inside, Jake half hanging out the door as they peeled away. More shots, and the van's back window spider-webbed but held. Then they were around a corner, then another, putting distance between them and the hospital. Only when they were sure they weren't being followed did Kyle slow down, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Those were Jason's crew," he said grimly. "The raiders from the industrial district. If they're planning to hit us, we've got big problems." They got back to the center and immediately called an emergency meeting. Derek listened to their report, his face growing darker with each detail. When they finished, he stood silent for a moment, thinking hard. "We knew this was coming eventually," he said finally. "Jason's been getting bolder, more aggressive. He sees what we've built and wants to take it. We've got two choices: we fortify and prepare to defend, or we accelerate the evacuation plan and get out before he attacks." Amanda shook her head. "We're not ready to evacuate. We don't have enough fuel, enough vehicles, enough intel on the route to Haven Point. We try to leave now, half of us won't make it. Then we defend," Derek decided. "We turn this place into a fortress and make it so expensive to attack us that Jason decides it's not worth it. We've got the numbers, the position, and the motivation. They've just got guns and attitude." The next 3 days were a frenzy of preparation. Jake worked around the clock, building reinforced firing positions, creating obstacles and choke points, turning the community center into something that could actually withstand a siege. Everyone contributed. Even the kids helped, filling sandbags and organizing supplies. Trevor proved surprisingly useful, his mind working through tactical scenarios with the help of Amanda. "They'll come at night," he predicted. "Try to use the darkness and the infected as cover. They'll expect us to be scared, disorganized. If we're ready, if we're disciplined, we can turn their advantages against them." Rebecca organized the noncombatants, creating a secure area in the center's basement where anyone who couldn't or wouldn't fight could shelter. Patricia set up a triage station, preparing for casualties nobody wanted but everyone expected. The attack came on the 4th night. Jake was on watch duty, standing on the roof with Amanda and 2 others, scanning the dark streets through binoculars. He saw them coming, vehicles with their lights off, moving slow and quiet, at least a dozen raiders, maybe more. "Here they come," Amanda said quietly into her radio. "Everyone to positions. Stay calm, stay focused. Remember your training." The raiders stopped just out of effective range, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then a voice echoed through the darkness, amplified by a bullhorn. "People of the Marshall Center. This is Jason Kane. You've got something we need, and we're taking it. You can surrender now, give us your supplies and weapons, and we'll let you live. Or you can fight, and we'll take it anyway, and you'll die. You've got 5 minutes to decide." Derek's voice came back, strong and unwavering. "Jason. You've got 1 minute to turn around and leave. We don't want trouble, but we won't back down. This is our home, and we're defending it." Jason's laugh was cruel. "Wrong answer, Derek. Boys, light him up." The night exploded with gunfire. Jake ducked behind the reinforced barriers they'd built, hearing bullets whine past overhead. Amanda returned fire with precise shots, her police training showing. All around the center's perimeter, defenders opened up, creating a wall of fire that made the raiders think twice. But Jason had brought more than guns. He'd brought fire. Molotov cocktails arced through the darkness, crashing against the center's walls, flames spreading. The smoke alarms they'd set up started screaming. Jake grabbed a fire extinguisher, rushing to put out the flames before they could spread. "They're trying to burn us out," someone shouted. Kyle appeared on the roof, carrying a rifle and a grim expression. "We need to break their attack, make them retreat." "Amanda, you got eyes on their vehicles?" 2 vans and a truck, position northwest, she reported. Jake, you still got that rifle of your dad's? Yeah, why? Kyle grinned without humor. Because we're going to show these raiders that we're not easy prey. You, me, and Marcus Rodriguez. We're going out there. It was insane. It was suicidal. It was also exactly what they needed to do. While the defenders kept the raiders pinned down with suppressing fire, Jake, Kyle, and Marcus slipped out a side door they'd kept hidden for exactly this kind of situation. They moved through the darkness like ghosts, using abandoned cars and debris for cover. The raiders were focused on the center, pouring fire into its walls, trying to find weak points. They never expected anyone to come from behind. Kyle hand-signaled the plan: take out their vehicles, cut off their escape, make them think twice about continuing the attack. Jake positioned himself near the truck, a big cargo vehicle probably loaded with the raiders' own supplies. He pulled out the improvised explosive Marcus the electrician had made, basically a road flare jury-rigged to a can of gasoline. It wasn't fancy, but it would work. Probably. He hoped. He lit it, counted to 3, and threw it into the truck's cargo bed. Then he ran like hell. Behind him, the explosion lit up the night, a gout of flame that sent raiders scattering and screaming. Kyle and Marcus hit the other vehicles with similar devices, and suddenly Jason's well-organized attack turned into chaos. Fall back. Fall back. Jason's voice screamed over the bullhorn, all confidence gone. The raiders retreated in disarray, dragging their wounded, leaving behind weapons and supplies in their panic. The defenders in the center cheered, but Derek's voice cut through the celebration. Hold your fire. Let them run. And someone put out those fires before we burned down our own home. The next hour was controlled chaos as they extinguished fires, counted casualties, and assessed damage. Miraculously, nobody from the center had been killed, though 3 people had minor injuries. They'd captured 4 raiders who'd been too slow to escape, disarmed them, and locked them in a secure room for questioning. Jake sat on the roof as dawn broke, watching the smoke clear, his whole body shaking with exhaustion and fading adrenaline. Derek climbed up to join him, carrying 2 bottles of water. He handed one to Jake. Hell of a thing you did out there, Derek said. Risky, but it worked. You might have saved a lot of lives tonight. I just did what needed doing, Jake replied, taking a long drink. We all did. That's what makes this place different, Derek said. In the old world, people would have scattered, every man for himself. But here, we fight for each other. We survive together or not at all. Over the next week, things changed at the Marshall Center. Word spread about their successful defense, and more survivors started showing up, looking for a place that could protect them. The center's population swelled to nearly 70 people. They'd also gained valuable intelligence from the captured raiders, including information about other survivor communities and the situation at Haven Point. It was real. Haven Point was real, a fortified community with farmland and fresh water and 1,000 survivors working together to rebuild. It wasn't perfect, but it was functioning, and they were actively recruiting other survivor groups to join them. Derek called a community vote. We can stay here and keep defending, maybe even thrive if we're smart and lucky. Or we can attempt the journey to Haven Point, risk everything for a chance at something bigger. This is a democracy. We all decide together. The vote was close, but the result was clear: they would attempt the evacuation. But they'd do it smart, organized, with preparation and planning. They'd spend the next month gathering supplies, vehicles, fuel, and weapons. They'd scout the route, identify safe houses and rest stops. They'd train everyone in convoy procedures and survival tactics. Jake threw himself into the preparations with everyone else. He modified vehicles, built portable barriers, created systems for communication and coordination. Rebecca worked with Trevor to map out the safest route, cross-referencing infected migration patterns with road conditions and fuel availability. Marcus the electrician designed a mobile power system so they could keep radios and essential equipment charged on the road. It was Amanda who came up with the final crucial piece of the plan. "We don't just evacuate," she said at a planning meeting. "We leave a legacy. We leave supplies, maps, messages for other survivors who might come after us. We create a network of safe houses between here and Haven Point, so the journey gets easier for everyone who follows." It was brilliant. Instead of just saving themselves, they'd be building something that could save countless others. The Marshall Center wouldn't just be abandoned, it would become a way station, a beacon for survivors who needed it. For weeks after the Raider attack, they were ready. 15 vehicles, 73 people, enough supplies to make the journey and contribute to Haven Point once they arrived. Jake stood in the center's main hall, looking at the maps and messages they'd left behind, the supplies they'd cached for future survivors. "You ready for this?" Rebecca asked, coming up beside him. "Honestly, I'm terrified," Jake admitted. "We're leaving the only safe place we've built, heading into the unknown, betting everything on a promise of something better." "That's not terrifying," Rebecca said with a slight smile. "That's hope. That's what humanity's always done. We see something better on the horizon, and we risk everything to reach it." Trevor appeared, his glasses now repaired with actual screws instead of duct tape. "Convoy's loaded. Derek says we move in 10 minutes. They gathered in the center's parking lot, 15 vehicles ranging from converted school buses to pickup trucks to motorcycles for scouts. Derek stood on the hood of the lead vehicle, addressing everyone one last time. "We started this journey alone, scared, running from death," he said. "We found each other, built a community, learned to fight back. Now we're taking the next step. The road ahead won't be easy. We'll face infected, raiders, weather, bad luck, and 100 things we can't predict. But we'll face it together, as a community, as a family. We're not just surviving anymore. We're building a future. Let's go show the world that humanity isn't finished yet." The convoy rolled out as the sun climbed into a clear blue sky. Jake drove one of the middle vehicles, a reinforced van carrying Marcus, Rebecca, Trevor, and 3 others. The radio crackled with updates from the scout motorcycles ahead, reporting clear roads and minimal infected presence. The first day went smoothly, almost eerily so. They made it 50 miles, following backroads and avoiding major highways where infected tended to gather. They stopped for the night at a pre-scouted location, an abandoned truck stop that they quickly fortified. Watch rotations were assigned, meals were prepared from their traveling supplies, and people settled in as best they could. Jake took second watch, standing on the truck stop's roof with Amanda and 2 others. The night was quiet except for the usual sounds of the dead world, distant moans, wind through empty buildings, the occasional sound of something collapsing in the darkness. "You think it'll be different at Haven Point?" Jake asked Amanda. "You think we can really rebuild?" "I think we have to believe we can," Amanda replied. "Because if we don't, what's the point? We didn't fight this hard, survive this long, just to give up before we see what's possible." The second day brought their first real challenge. The scout motorcycles reported a major infected herd blocking the planned route, easily 300 strong. Kyle called a halt while they figured out an alternate path. "We can go around, adds about 20 miles, Marcus Rodriguez reported, studying the maps. "Or we can wait them out, see if the herd moves on. Could be hours, could be days." Trevor spoke up from where he was monitoring the radio. "There's a third option. I've been listening to the broadcasts. There's another survivor convoy heading north, about 10 miles west of us. If we coordinate, combine forces temporarily, we have enough numbers to either fight through the herd or create a distraction big enough to draw them off." Derek considered it. "That's risky. We don't know these people. They could be raiders, worse than Jason's crew. Or they could be people just like us," Rebecca countered. "Trying to survive, trying to reach something better. We've got to take some chances, Derek." They made contact via radio. The other convoy's leader was a woman named Captain Elizabeth Torres, former National Guard. Her group was 40 people strong, also heading to Haven Point. After a tense negotiation and exchange of information, they agreed to meet, combine forces temporarily, and deal with the herd together. The two convoys met at an abandoned shopping mall. There was initial wariness, weapons kept ready but not pointed, everyone sizing each other up. But Captain Torres was professional and straightforward, and Derek matched her energy. Within an hour, they'd worked out a joint plan. "We create a diversion using vehicles and explosives," Torres explained. "Draw the herd off to the east while both convoys punch through to the west. We move fast, don't look back, and regroup 10 miles north. Once we're clear, we split up again if that's what both groups want, but we help each other get past this obstacle." It worked beautifully. 2 vehicles loaded with car alarms, propane tanks, and every noisemaker they could find were driven remotely using rigged steering and gas pedals, sent screaming into a location east of the herd. The infected responded exactly as predicted, surging toward the noise. While they were distracted, both convoys blew past on the western route, moving fast and smooth. They regrouped as planned, and after some discussion, the two groups decided to continue together. More people meant more security, more skills, more chance of success. Jake found himself talking with some of Torres's people, sharing stories, comparing survival strategies. There was a former teacher who'd been organizing education for the kids in Torres's convoy. A mechanic who'd kept their vehicles running despite no access to spare parts. A farmer who knew about crops and seasons and how to make things grow. These were good people. People worth saving, worth fighting alongside. The journey continued. Day 3 brought rain, which made driving treacherous but also kept infected activity low. Day 4, they had to stop and repair several vehicles that had developed problems. Day 5, they encountered another survivor group, smaller and less organized, and after careful vetting, added another 15 people to the growing convoy. By day 7, they were 80 miles from Haven Point and moving through increasingly organized territory. They started seeing signs, literal signs, posted along the road, pointing the way to Haven Point, giving distances and directions. Some of the signs had messages: safe houses marked with blue paint, water available at rest stops, you're almost there. Keep going. The relief Jake felt was overwhelming. They weren't alone. Other survivors had made this journey, had built this network, had created something sustainable. Hope wasn't just a word anymore. It was real, tangible, visible in blue paint and hand-lettered signs. On the 8th day, they saw it, Haven Point, spread across a valley, a small town transformed into a fortified community. There were walls made of shipping containers and concrete barriers. Guard towers with actual guards. Fields with crops growing. Solar panels and wind turbines. Smoke from cooking fires and workshops. And people, hundreds of people, living and working and building a future. The convoy was met by a welcoming committee that included doctors for medical checks, administrators for processing new arrivals, and security for vetting. The process was thorough but friendly, and by evening, Derek's group and Torres's group were officially registered as residents of Haven Point. Jake stood on a hill overlooking the community as the sun set, painting everything in gold and orange. Rebecca joined him, neither of them speaking for a long moment. "We made it," she said finally, her voice full of wonder. "We actually made it." "Yeah," Jake agreed. "We did. And now comes the hard part. What's harder than surviving a zombie apocalypse?" Jake smiled. "Building something worth surviving for. Making this place not just safe, but good. Creating a world our kids might actually want to live in." Trevor approached, excited. "You guys have to see this. They've got a library, an actual library with books about engineering and agriculture and medicine. And they're setting up a school. A real school." Marcus was right behind him, grinning. "And they need electricians. Can you believe it? My skills are actually valuable again. I'm not just some old guy taking up resources. I can contribute." That night, Haven Point held a community gathering to welcome the new arrivals. The community's founders spoke about their vision, not just survival, but civilization. They talked about laws and governance, about agriculture and industry, about education and culture. They talked about expanding, about sending out missions to rescue more survivors, about reclaiming the world one safe community at a time. Derek was asked to speak on behalf of the new arrivals. He stood before hundreds of people, his voice strong and clear. 3 weeks ago, I was alone and terrified, convinced the world had ended and there was nothing left worth fighting for. Then I found other survivors, people who refused to give up, who fought back against the darkness. We built a community from nothing. We defended it against raiders. We made an impossible journey because we believed in something better. And now we're here, ready to be part of something even bigger. We bring skills, experience, determination, and hope. We're ready to work, to contribute, to help build a future. Thank you for giving us this chance. The applause was thunderous. Jake felt tears on his face and didn't bother wiping them away. They'd done it. They'd gone from fear to resistance, from survival to hope, from the end of the world to the beginning of a new one. The next morning, Jake reported to the construction supervisor, a no-nonsense woman named Daniels who reminded him of every foreman he'd ever worked under. She looked at his work history, asked him a few technical questions, and nodded approvingly. We're building a new residential block, expanding the safe zone. I can use someone who knows what they're doing. You start tomorrow, 6 a.m. sharp. We pay in food credits and housing priority. You work hard, you rise fast. Welcome to the rebuilding, Morrison. As Jake walked through Haven Point, seeing people working in fields, repairing buildings, teaching children, living actual lives despite the dead world outside the walls, he felt something he hadn't felt in months: peace. Not the absence of danger, because the danger was still there, always would be. But peace in knowing that humanity hadn't given up, that they were fighting back, that there was still a future worth building. He passed Derek, who was meeting with community leaders about organizing rescue missions to other survivor groups. He saw Rebecca heading to the library, her face lit up with intellectual hunger. Trevor was with a group of teenagers being taught by Amanda about security and survival. Marcus the electrician was knee-deep in wiring, teaching 2 younger people his trade. Everyone had found a place. Everyone had a purpose. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were living, building, creating. The zombie apocalypse had tried to end humanity, but humanity had looked death in the face and said not today. Jake found himself at the community's wall, looking out at the world beyond, at the danger and the darkness. But for the first time, he didn't just see threats. He saw possibility. He saw land that could be reclaimed, communities that could be rescued, a world that could be rebuilt piece by piece, day by day, person by person. The journey from fear to resistance had been brutal and terrifying. But it had also been worth it. Because they'd learned the most important lesson: alone, they were vulnerable, terrified, doomed. Together, they were strong, capable, unstoppable. The zombies had taken the old world, but this new world, this world of survival and ingenuity and hope, that belonged to the living. And they were going to fight like hell to keep it. As the sun climbed higher, Jake turned away from the wall and walked back into Haven Point, ready to start building. The apocalypse wasn't over. Maybe it never would be. But humanity's response to it, that was just beginning. And Jake Morrison, former construction worker, survivor, builder, was ready to be part of it. They all were. The dead could have the ruins of the old world. The living were building something new, something better, something worth dying for, but, more importantly, something worth living for. And that made all the difference.